Divorced for 7 years, Millionaire discovers his divorced ex-wife secretly had twins. He's in shock. A cryptic late-night phone call, a decades-old family feud, a set of dusty photos found in an attic. These are the threads that unravel the tightly woven secret around James Harrington, an ambitious millionaire with a heart of stone. Or so they say. 7 years ago, he divorced Victoria under mysterious, painful circumstances. He left everything behind, believing he could forge a new life devoid of heartbreak or regret. But when a brief encounter shakes him to the core, James discovers that Victoria has been harboring a life-altering secret, not just one child, but twins, his twins. The shocking revelation sets the stage for a rollercoaster of betrayal, love, and redemption. Below is a dramatic, fictionalized account filled with twists, turns, and heart-stopping moments. Any resemblance to real individuals is entirely coincidental. Enjoy this story told in novel form. James Harrington was never a man to dwell on the past. At 35, he was the head of a software empire that he'd built from the ground up, Harrington Innovations. His life, meticulously scheduled, revolved around business meetings, high-stakes negotiations, and lavish galas in New York's most exclusive circles. He knew how to charm an audience, how to close deals, how to get the best out of people until the day he'd met Victoria Lambert. They had met at a charity ball in Manhattan 8 years ago. Victoria, then a struggling artist, had impressed him with her wit and resilience. She didn't fawn over him like the other women he'd encountered. Instead, she teased him about his tie, which she claimed clashed with his suit, and from that moment on, James was hooked. Their courtship was swift, intense, and fueled by shared dreams and whispered promises. A year later, they were married under the starlight in an extravagant ceremony at the Harrington estate. Everyone thought it was a match made in heaven. The ambitious millionaire and the talented, spirited artist who brought color to his otherwise monochrome life. But behind the carefully curated front, cracks began to form. James's board members at Harrington Innovations constantly whispered that Victoria was a distraction. She was too idealistic, too bohemian for the cutthroat world of corporate success. Meanwhile, Victoria, tired of living under a microscope, complained of feeling suffocated by James's controlling nature and the constant media attention. The final straw came when James, under immense pressure from his board, agreed to move their base of operations to London. It wasn't the move itself that ended the marriage. Victoria liked the adventure of new places. It was the secretive dealings and personal betrayals that came with it. Old resentments clashed, dark words were exchanged. Before they knew it, they were in the midst of a divorce that left them both irreparably scarred. They severed ties, or so James believed. For 7 years, he heard almost nothing of Victoria, but a single phone call during a late night of restless insomnia changed everything. "James," came the trembling voice on the other end. "It's Elizabeth Davis, Victoria's aunt. I think you should see some pictures I found." Pictures. The conversation was brief and cryptic. Elizabeth wouldn't say more. She simply insisted James come to her house in Brooklyn. That was how James found himself, a day later, staring at a small stack of photographs in Elizabeth's living room, photos that made his heart jolt. Standing beside Victoria in these images were 2 children, twins, who looked unmistakably like him. Elizabeth Davis, Victoria's maternal aunt, had always been a kind but no-nonsense woman. She had run her own bakery, Davis Delights, in the heart of Brooklyn for over 30 years. She'd witnessed family feuds and reconciliations, births and deaths, heartbreak and triumphs. With her silver-streaked hair and watchful gaze, she seemed to carry the sorrow of the entire Davis clan in her eyes. When James arrived at her home, Elizabeth wasted no time. She beckoned him to an old coffee table and placed before him a small envelope, battered and stained. "Open it," she said, her voice thick with concern. Inside were nearly a dozen photos. The first few featured Victoria in a quaint suburban house, smiling. Then came a photo of Victoria cradling a baby boy. Another shot a toddler boy and a toddler girl, each holding Victoria's hand. Elizabeth watched James carefully, gauging his reaction. James felt his pulse hammering in his temples. The boy had hair that mirrored James's chestnut color and eyes shaped uncannily like his father's. The girl had the same dimple James saw in the mirror when he offered the world his trademark lopsided grin. He swallowed hard. "How old are they?" he finally managed, fighting to keep his voice steady. "They'll turn 7 next month," Elizabeth responded, her hand trembling as she poured tea into 2 mismatched cups. Victoria named them Noah and Lily. 7. The timeline lined up perfectly with the tail end of his marriage. Shockwaves reverberated through James's body. Why had Victoria kept this from him? How had she managed to hide not 1 but 2 children? Elizabeth explained she had stumbled upon the photos when cleaning out old family albums. Victoria had insisted on secrecy. The rest of the family had obeyed, partly out of loyalty and partly due to a complicated set of circumstances. Victoria had insisted they wouldn't understand. "I'm telling you now," Elizabeth said, "because I believe you have the right to know. They're your children, James." The walls of the living room pressed in on James, and the floral couch beneath him felt unsteady. Memories flooded back Victoria's tears during their final arguments, her pleas for him to listen, his own blindness to what she might have been going through. He lifted his gaze to meet Elizabeth's. "Where is she? Where are they now?" Victoria moved to a small town outside Boston, near her friend Sarah Carter's place, Elizabeth said. She didn't want to remain in New York after everything. James inhaled shakily, the reality of fatherhood settling into his bones. In that moment, he realized life as he knew it was about to change forever. He wasn't just a self-made millionaire with an empire to run. He was a father of twins. Leaving Elizabeth's townhouse, James felt a weight drop onto his shoulders. Rage and hurt mingled with curiosity and tenderness. Victoria had robbed him of 7 years he could have had with his children. How could she justify that? He wanted answers. The next day, after a sleepless night filled with replayed memories, James instructed his personal assistant, Caroline Wu, to rearrange his schedule. He needed to go to Boston immediately. Caroline, ever efficient, asked no questions. She had seen James distressed only once before, during his messy divorce. But she recognized that this crisis, though personal, surpassed every other obligation. Armed with the address Elizabeth had hesitantly provided, James found himself driving through a peaceful suburb outside Boston the following afternoon. Green lawns stretched in neat rows, and porch swings swayed gently in the breeze. The house in question was a modest, pale blue cottage, adorned with a small garden of daisies and sunflowers. If James hadn't been so emotionally tormented, he might have found it charming. He parked his sleek BMW in the driveway and stepped out. For a long moment, he simply stood there, scanning every detail: the white picket fence, the welcome mat that read "Home Sweet Home," the child-sized bicycles leaning against the garage. No butler answered the door here, no press cameras lurked around. This was far from the glitzy world he inhabited. His knock sounded abnormally loud. When the door opened, the woman standing behind it was not Victoria, but a petite brunette with a kind face. She wore a paint-splattered apron and carried a brush in one hand. "Can I help you?" she asked, raising an eyebrow. "My name is James Harrington," he began, his voice betraying his anxiety. "I'm looking for Victoria Lambert. Or Harrington, rather." The woman's face paled. "I'm Sarah Carter," she said, her voice strained. Victoria's friend. She hesitated a moment, then sighed. I suppose you should come in. Inside, the living room smelled of fresh paint. Canvases were stacked against the wall, beautiful landscapes, cityscapes, and a few abstract pieces. James recognized Victoria's style instantly. Bold strokes, vibrant colors. Despite the tension in his chest, a flicker of pride surfaced. She was painting again. James swallowed. I need to see her. I've just found out that you have children, Sarah interrupted, her expression softening slightly. She's been trying to protect them. She was afraid. James's voice cracked. Afraid of what? Me? Sarah offered him a sad smile. There are many reasons, James. I think you should hear it from Victoria herself. As if on cue, footsteps approached from a hallway. James's heart pounded, bracing himself for the first face-to-face encounter with the woman who'd carried his children without his knowledge for 7 years. Or was it truly without his knowledge, or had he simply refused to see the signs? Victoria stood in the hallway, her eyes wide with shock. She looked different from how James remembered, thinner, paler, and with faint lines of worry etched around her eyes. But she was still strikingly beautiful, her raven black hair cascading over her shoulders. In her hand, she clutched a half-finished drawing of a swirling sunset, pastel crayons smudged on her fingers. For a moment, neither spoke. They seemed trapped in that silent hallway, 7 years' worth of unspoken confessions and suppressed pain threatening to burst. Finally, Victoria cleared her throat. James, why are you here? Her voice trembled, yet retained a note of defiance. James stepped closer, an overwhelming mix of anger and hurt flashing across his face. Why do you think I'm here? He demanded, keeping his voice as calm as possible. I found out about Noah and Lily. Sarah discreetly retreated to the kitchen, leaving them alone. The color drained from Victoria's face. She forced herself to stand taller, meeting his gaze. I never planned on you finding out like this. Then how did you plan on me finding out? James shot back, voice rising. Or were you never going to tell me I'm a father? She swallowed. The tension in the air crackled. It's not that simple, she finally said. I had reasons. We were toxic, James. Our fights, your corporate ambitions. I didn't want my children used as pawns in your business world. And you, James cut her off, his eyes brimming with betrayal. You think I'd use my own children as pawns? You always believed the worst of me, Victoria. She stared at the floor, recalling bitter arguments from their marriage. I tried to tell you I was pregnant, but you were already halfway out the door, she whispered. Every time I tried to approach you, your lawyers would intercept. It all happened so fast. Our divorce was finalized even before I could gather the courage to face you. His anger faltered for a moment, replaced by confusion and regret. Could he have truly missed the signs? Looking back, he remembered the days she'd been ill, her frustration at his endless trips. Perhaps she hadn't been exaggerating or simply distressed. Maybe she was trying to tell him something all along. Victoria continued, her voice breaking. I was scared, James. I was alone. I came here to live quietly and raise Noah and Lily away from the Harrington name, away from scandal, from your ruthless associates. I didn't want them to be pawns in your father's legacy. Don't you see? He closed his eyes. Memories of board meetings, corporate maneuverings, and a father who had always demanded James surpass every expectation flooded him. Maybe she wasn't entirely wrong to be cautious, but still, she robbed him of precious years with his children. He opened his eyes, tears threatening to surface. I'm here now, he whispered, voice raw. And they're my children, Victoria. I have a right to know them. The next hour slipped by in a tense haze of half-spoken truths and painful explanations. Sarah hovered in the background, offering tea and a sympathetic ear. Victoria and James danced around each other like two wary animals trying to figure out if the other posed a threat. Eventually, the door creaked open. Two small voices echoed in the hallway. "Mom, we're back!" A pair of exuberant twins, a boy and a girl, raced into the living room, backpacks swinging wildly. As soon as they spotted James, they froze. The girl was the first to speak. "Mom, who's that?" She was a whirlwind of energy, with wide hazel eyes and a smile that could melt steel. Her hair was styled in two adorable braids, ribbons fluttering as she moved. Lily, Noah, quieter, hung back, observing James with a hesitant curiosity. He had the same wary spark in his eyes James recognized from his own reflection when he was uncertain. James's heart constricted at the sight. Victoria gently ushered the children closer. She knelt down to their eye level, taking a deep breath. James noticed the tremor in her hands. "Noah, Lily," she began softly, "this is James Harrington. He's someone from my past." James's pulse hammered. He wanted to shout, "I'm your father," but forced himself to remain still. He didn't want to traumatize them. They deserved to be eased into the truth. Lily blinked, tugging on her mother's sleeve. "Is he that famous businessman?" she whispered, eyes bright with curiosity. "The one who invented that phone app that helps with—" Yeah, that's me," James replied, kneeling as well, trying to make himself smaller, less intimidating. "I, work in technology." Noah just stared. Finally he spoke, voice measured. "Why are you in our house?" The child's gaze made James want to crumble. He had no idea how to respond. He glanced helplessly at Victoria, who found the courage to speak. "He came to visit," she said gently. "We have a lot to talk about, kids." Unsure what to do, James reached into his pocket. He'd picked up 2 sets of color pencils and sketchbooks from a local art store on the way, remembering how Victoria had always cherished art supplies. "I brought these for you both," he stammered. Lily's eyes lit up. She practically danced over, taking the gift with excitement. Noah approached more cautiously, but he took the sketchbook, flipping through its blank pages with a growing flicker of interest. In that moment, James realized his children had a spark of creativity, perhaps passed on from both parents. Even as Lily giggled at the new set of pencils, a hush hung over the air. Everyone knew a greater conversation lay ahead. The children might not understand now, but soon enough the truth would come to light, altering their peaceful world forever. That evening, Victoria asked James to leave before dinner, giving the children space to process his unexpected appearance. Though he longed to stay, James respected her request and returned to a nearby boutique hotel. However, the cozy decor and the crisp white sheets did nothing to calm his mind. Sleep refused him. He tossed and turned, replaying the day's events over and over. The next morning, he received a text from Victoria. "We need to talk. Meet me at Sarah's place at noon." A swirl of relief and anxiety washed over him. This was a chance to sit down without the twins eavesdropping. Maybe they could sort out a plan, if such a thing were possible, after so many years of distrust. Before leaving, James called Caroline in New York and asked her to clear his schedule for the next week. He needed time. If his board members complained, he would handle that later. Right now, this took precedence. He was father first, CEO second. When James arrived back at the cottage, he found Victoria and Sarah in the kitchen, cups of coffee in hand. The twins were at school, so the house was quiet. Every nerve in James's body felt electrified, anticipating the confrontation. Sarah excused herself to give them privacy, disappearing into her study. Victoria gestured for James to sit at the small wooden dining table. Outside, a gentle breeze rustled the wind chimes, providing a serene backdrop to the turmoil within. Victoria sighed. "We need to figure out how to handle this. I never wanted to keep them away from you forever, despite what it must look like." But you have to understand, I feared you'd gain custody or use your influence to overshadow their childhood. James swallowed his resentment. I understand you had your reasons, even if I don't agree with them, but they're my children, Victoria. I want to be part of their lives. I missed 7 years already, and I won't miss any more. She nodded, tears welling in her eyes. I know, that's why I'm here, talking to you. But they're not used to having a father. They only know me. And some friends like Sarah. Suddenly introducing you as their dad would be a shock. James ran a hand through his hair, frustration mounting. So what do? We take this slowly, Victoria said. Noah and Lily need time to trust you. I think you should spend time with them supervised at first until they get comfortable. You must promise not to push them. He wanted to protest, but knew she was right. A forced relationship could backfire, adding more chaos to their young lives. All right, he conceded. Supervised visits at first. But what about the future? Are you planning to stay here indefinitely? Victoria shrugged, her gaze drifting to the window. This cottage is our home now. The kids have friends, a routine. Uprooting them for the hustle of New York or the glare of media attention, that terrifies me. James nodded, realizing that forging a life with his newly discovered children would require more compromise than he was used to. Uncharted territory lay before them, riddled with tension, but also the flicker of a second chance. A week passed in a blur of tentative introductions. James spent afternoons at the cottage, under Victoria's watchful eye, slowly inching his way into Noah and Lily's day-to-day routine. He was careful not to intrude too forcefully, mindful of Victoria's protective stance. Surprisingly, Sarah offered an unexpected source of support. She would often take Lily or Noah aside, gently explaining that James was a friend who cared about them and wanted to know them better. Art became James's secret weapon. Having discovered how much the twins loved to draw, he brought them fresh supplies, colored pens, watercolors, and even a digital drawing tablet. Lily shrieked with delight over the tablet's features, eagerly testing out new brushes and color palettes. Noah, more subdued, nonetheless showed a quiet fascination in rendering lifelike portraits of the family's cat, Pepper. Day by day, the tension in the household softened. Lily began asking James endless questions about his life in New York, about the technology behind the tablet, and if it was true that he once met the mayor. Noah was still hesitant. He would hang back, observing, but occasionally James caught glimpses of the boy's curiosity when Noah asked about coding or how phone apps were made. One afternoon, while Lily was engrossed in painting with Sarah, James found Noah alone in the backyard, tinkering with a small wooden project. The boy seemed focused, brows knitted in concentration. "Need any help?" James ventured, careful not to loom too close. Noah shrugged. "I'm building a birdhouse for Mum's birthday." James crouched down, trying to find the right tone. "That's pretty cool. Where'd you learn to do this?" "Sarah showed me how. She's good with tools," Noah replied, glancing up. He hesitated, eyes flicking toward James. "Is it hard to make a big building like a skyscraper? Like the Harrington Tower in New York?" James's breath caught, so the boy knew of his achievements. "Well, I didn't build it myself," he admitted with a smile. "I worked with a lot of architects and engineers, but it's not easy. It takes planning, teamwork, and patience." Noah nodded slowly, digesting the information. There was a long pause before the boy spoke again. "Mum said, 'You're a busy man.'" James exhaled. "I am, but I'm trying to make time for important things now." He mustered a kind smile. "And this birdhouse looks important. Do you mind if I help? Maybe I can hold the pieces while you nail them." For a moment, Noah studied James warily, but then the boy nodded, silently offering James a small hammer. That simple gesture felt like a monumental victory. Building that tiny birdhouse, side by side, was the first time James felt like a father. While James was slowly earning trust from Noah and Lily, ghosts from his past began resurfacing. News of his absence from Harrington Innovations fueled rumors among board members and investors alike. Caroline called him daily with urgent updates. The company's stock had dipped slightly, and an opportunistic rival, Maxwell Cunningham, was swooping in on a crucial deal. "James, you have to come back," Caroline insisted on one call. "We're losing ground in the European market, and Maxwell is capitalizing on your absence." James gritted his teeth. He had worked so hard to expand internationally, forging relationships in London, Berlin and Amsterdam. "I'll schedule a conference call tomorrow," he promised. "But, Caroline, I can't just leave right now." His personal life was at a tipping point. Any abrupt move might shatter the fragile bond forming with his children. Yet ignoring his corporate responsibilities risked everything he'd built. He felt torn, simultaneously wanting to protect his empire and cultivate the newfound relationship that truly mattered. Adding to the tension, an unexpected visitor arrived one evening. George Harrington, James's father. A formidable figure in the business world, George had once guided James's early ventures with an iron fist, demanding perfection. Their relationship was complex, marred by an undercurrent of fierce pride and constant disapproval. James was just stepping out of the cottage after a day with the twins when he saw the Harrington family chauffeur-driven sedan pull up. George emerged, dressed in a tailored suit, hair silvered with age but posture still commanding. The two men stared at each other, tension crackling like static electricity. "Son," George said by way of greeting. His gaze flicked around the unassuming neighborhood with thinly veiled distaste. "What on earth are you doing here? Do you realize your absence is causing chaos at the company? Maxwell Cunningham is picking off our clients like a vulture." James bristled, crossing his arms. "I'm aware, but there are more important things at stake right now." George's eyes narrowed. "More important than safeguarding the Harrington name and fortune. Have you lost your mind?" James clenched his jaw. "I found out I have children, Dad, twins. Victoria kept them from me. I'm doing what's right by them now." George's stiff demeanor faltered for a moment. He blinked in shock. "What are you talking about? Victoria has children? Are you sure they're yours?" The insinuation stung. "They are, no doubt about it," James snapped. George exhaled, struggling to compose himself. "I had no idea." "But James, your responsibilities don't vanish just because you discovered new ones. The Harrington Empire needs you. Don't let this woman and her children derail everything." James felt a spark of anger. "They are my children, Dad, and I won't abandon them for the sake of stock prices." George opened his mouth to retort, but was interrupted as the cottage door swung open. Victoria stood there, confusion and apprehension etched across her face. She recognized George instantly. It was impossible to forget the stern patriarch who had once loomed large over James's life. In that moment, James realized his worlds, his father, and his new family were colliding, and he dreaded the fallout that was sure to follow. George Harrington's arrival introduced a new tension into the budding family dynamic. When Victoria saw him standing in the front yard with James, her spine stiffened. She recalled their brief encounters during her marriage, always formal, always charged with unspoken disapproval. George had never openly insulted her, but his condescension dripped from every measured word and unyielding stare. "Good evening, Victoria," George greeted with a stiff inclination of his head. "I heard about the children. Congratulations." His tone suggested he wasn't exactly congratulating anyone. Victoria nodded warily. "Thank you. They're inside, but I would rather they not be around for this conversation." George's lips thinned. "Very well." He turned his attention to James, who was standing protectively at Victoria's side. Son, I came to take you back to New York. The company is in jeopardy. You've done your fatherly duty by showing up here. Let's not overcomplicate things. James felt a flash of indignation. They are not an obligation I can check off my list. I plan to be involved, Dad, day by day. Victoria's gaze flicked between them, old anxieties resurfacing. She spoke quietly but firmly. We are trying to do what's best for Noah and Lily, Mr. Harrington. A rapid change to your fast-paced world would be overwhelming. They're just children. George's response was swift. I respect your maternal instincts, but James has a legacy to uphold. If you truly care about the children's future, you'll realize that they stand to inherit a considerable fortune, one that shouldn't be jeopardized by a few months of father-son bonding in a random Boston suburb. An icy dread trickled down Victoria's spine. She knew that tone, that unyielding sense of entitlement that the Harrington family exuded. Suddenly, she imagined the future, boardrooms full of corporate sharks eyeing her children like pawns. The very scenario she had tried to avoid for 7 years. Yet, James was different, wasn't he? James inhaled deeply, placing a steady hand on Victoria's shoulder. Dad, your perspective is outdated. I've run Harrington Innovations for years. I've balanced expansions, acquisitions, philanthropic endeavors. I can manage fatherhood too. I'm not leaving until I'm sure the twins are comfortable with me. And if that means Maxwell Cunningham gets ahead temporarily, so be it. George's eyes hardened. You can't let sentimentality ruin everything you've built. There's more at stake than your personal guilt. I came here to tell you, if you don't return soon, the board may consider ousting you as CEO temporarily or otherwise. Victoria felt James's muscles tense at her side. She knew how much his company meant to him. He had poured his soul into that empire. But now, she saw in his eyes that fatherhood had quietly become just as important, perhaps even more. Faced with his father's ultimatum, James stood at a crossroads. That night, James sat alone in his hotel room, staring at his laptop screen, an empty whiskey glass at his side. His email inbox overflowed with urgent pleas from board members and countless messages from investors anxious about his absence. The threat from Maxwell Cunningham grew more pressing by the day. Meanwhile, George Harrington had retreated to a penthouse suite downtown, expecting James to come to his senses. But James couldn't forget the startled joy in Noah's eyes that afternoon when they finished the birdhouse together, or the squeals of laughter from Lily when James had accidentally splashed paint on his shirt during an art session. These little moments felt more fulfilling than any corporate victory. Yet the weight of his empire loomed large. Could he truly have both? When he finally closed his laptop, the time was nearly midnight. Still, he ventured out, driving through the quiet suburban streets until he found himself at Victoria's cottage. The windows were mostly dark, but a soft glow illuminated the living room. He knocked gently, hoping not to wake the children. Victoria opened the door, surprise etched across her features. James? It's late. His shoulders sagged. I'm sorry, I needed someone to talk to. She hesitated, then stepped aside. He entered the dim living room, noticing the flickering of a single lamp and the faint smell of paint thinner. A half-finished canvas leaned against an easel, swirls of turquoise and peach dancing across it. He sighed, sinking onto the sofa. My father's pressuring me to go back. The board's up in arms. I might lose the company if I don't return soon. Victoria's expression softened. That company is your life, James. I know it's not easy to turn your back on it. He ran a hand through his hair. It was my life. But now there's more. Every time I see Lily and Noah, I realize what I've been missing. She settled beside him, carefully measuring her words. I'm not standing in your way. I know how important Harrington Innovations is to you, but the children need consistency. If you vanish for weeks at a time, popping in and out, that might hurt them more. He locked eyes with her. then come to New York. Victoria's eyes widened. We just got done talking about how the city, the media, the corporate environment might harm the kids. That's why I moved here in the first place. I'm not sure if I can uproot them. James leaned forward, elbows on his knees, feeling the magnitude of the dilemma. I don't want to rip them out of their home. But I also can't abandon my company. It's not just about money, it's about the people who work there, the philanthropic programs we sponsor. If I'm forced out, Maxwell will unravel everything I've built. Silence stretched. Then Victoria placed a tentative hand on his shoulder. The contact, gentle yet meaningful, reminded them of a time before all the bitterness. "We'll figure something out," she whispered. "Maybe we can find a compromise." In the hush of the late-night glow, the two former spouses found a fragile truce, united by the shared love for their children and the knowledge that something bigger than themselves was at stake. The following morning, Victoria awoke with the seed of an idea taking root in her mind. She made fresh coffee, her thoughts swirling. What if they tried a temporary move to New York, just for a short while, to test the waters? She hated the idea of returning to the city that had once been the stage for her heartbreak, but it might give James time to stabilize Harrington Innovations and allow him to be with the twins. When James arrived later that day, still looking drained, Victoria cleared her throat. "I have a proposal," she began, bracing herself for the conversation. "I've been thinking. The kids have summer break coming up in 2 months. We could come to New York for that period. It would let you manage the company without leaving them behind." James's eyes lit with cautious hope. "You'd do that?" Victoria nodded. "On one condition, we keep it as low profile as possible. No big press releases, no paparazzi. I don't want the kids thrust into the media spotlight. Also, you have to arrange a stable routine for them, school or day camp, extracurricular activities, a safe living environment." James exhaled, relief battling with anxiety. "I can do that. I'll buy or rent a place in a quieter neighborhood away from Midtown, something family-friendly. We'll keep them off the tabloids." Victoria bit her lip, memories of tabloid headlines flickering. "And your father? Will he respect boundaries? I don't want him interfering or challenging every decision I make for the kids." A shadow passed across James's face. "I'll make it clear he has no say in how we raise them. This is between you, me, and the twins." She nodded, wanting to believe him. "All right, then let's start planning. We have time to prep the kids for a temporary stay in New York, and if it feels wrong or the kids hate it, we'll come back immediately." James mustered a small smile. "Thank you, Victoria. I know this is a big step. We'll make it work." They spent the rest of the morning making a list of tasks, find suitable housing, research summer programs for the twins, discuss logistics with the local school so the kids could return after break without issues, coordinate with Harrington Innovations to reduce media exposure. For a moment it felt like they were a team again, though the scars of the past still lingered, overshadowing every conversation. A glimmer of hope emerged. When Noah and Lily returned from school, James awkwardly tried to explain that they might spend part of the summer in New York. Lily bounced in excitement at the prospect of city lights and museums. Noah, on the other hand, looked uncertain but listened quietly, eventually nodding. It was a small but positive sign. None of them knew just how tumultuous the next phase of their lives would become once they returned to the city that had shaped and broken their family. 2 months later, the Harrington private jet taxied on a runway at a small, discreet airfield just outside Manhattan. James had insisted on traveling this way to keep the children out of the public eye. Victoria, holding Lily's hand, looked around with apprehension. She felt the city's pulse, even from here. Noah stood close, holding his sketchbook. They were met by Caroline Wu, who greeted the twins with a warm smile and handed them small welcome gifts, NYC-themed coloring books. Then a black SUV whisked them away to a townhouse James had rented on the Upper West Side, near Central Park. It was far from the bustling corporate heart of Midtown and offered a bit more privacy. The four-story home had plenty of space. Each child had their own bedroom. There was a courtyard garden and an art room prepared especially for Victoria, stocked with supplies. The twins, eyes widening at the sight of the grand staircase, scampered inside, exploring every nook. Lily giggled when she discovered a swing in the private courtyard, and Noah marveled at the high-tech security system. Victoria took a deep breath. It was an opulent environment, far removed from their cozy Boston cottage. She prayed it wouldn't overwhelm the children. Within days, James found himself juggling fatherhood and corporate chaos. At Harrington Innovations, he was met by uneasy board members who demanded explanations for his prolonged absence. Maxwell Cunningham had maneuvered behind the scenes, sowing doubt about James's leadership. It took all of James's diplomatic skill and strategic thinking to stave off a coup. Slowly, he managed to regain the board's confidence by unveiling a new plan for expansion that included improved employee benefits and philanthropic endeavors in education ideas he'd brainstormed while reflecting on fatherhood. In the evenings, James hurried home to have dinner with the twins and Victoria. He listened eagerly to Lily's stories about the day camp near Central Park and answered Noah's endless questions about programming and design. The boy had even started tinkering with basic coding tutorials on a tablet James gave him. Meanwhile, Victoria adapted to the city's pulse, though warily. She found a small studio in a local art collective to work on her paintings during the day, dropping by the townhouse to check on the kids in between. But not all was smooth sailing. Paparazzi still lurked occasionally, snapping photos whenever James left the office. Social media speculated about the identity of the two children seen with him. Rumors swirled that they might be nieces or some philanthropic involvement. The Harrington PR team kept a tight lid on the truth for now. And then there was George Harrington. True to his word, James kept him at arm's length when it came to the children. But one evening, while James was still at the office, George showed up unannounced at the townhouse's doorstep. Victoria, taken by surprise, found herself face to face with the patriarch once again. And this time, he wore a disarmingly pleasant expression, as though wanting to bridge the gap, if only for his own agenda. George Harrington had always been a formidable figure, but on this particular visit, he wore a softer air, an unsettling shift that put Victoria on guard. Nevertheless, she allowed him inside, aware that turning him away might spark more conflict. "Where are the children?" he asked politely, though his tone carried authority. He scanned the tasteful interior, pausing briefly on the family photographs James had hastily arranged on a mantel. "They're at day camp," Victoria replied, crossing her arms. "James will pick them up later." George nodded, taking a seat in the living room. Silence stretched between them, tension thrumming like a tight string. Finally, George cleared his throat. "Look, I know we've had our differences. I wasn't particularly warm to you during your marriage to James." Victoria raised an eyebrow at the understatement. "You made it clear you didn't approve." His gaze flicked downward. "My approach has always been pragmatic, especially in business. I worried you were a distraction for James, but I see now your children are a reality he must embrace. And as their grandfather, I want to be part of their lives." She studied him, noting the wrinkles etched by age, and wondered if this was genuine remorse or just another angle of control. "They don't even know who you are," she said quietly. "They don't know you exist." A flicker of pain crossed George's face, gone almost as quickly as it appeared. "I realize I'm late to the table, and I won't pretend to understand your choices. But they are my grandchildren. I can give them opportunities beyond measure, private schools, connections in all fields. Why not let me help shape their future? Victoria's shoulders tensed. This was precisely what she had feared, the Harrington brand overshadowing the kids' individuality. They're not pieces on a chessboard, Mr. Harrington. I want them to grow, discover their passions, and choose their paths without being molded into the Harrington legacy. George leaned back, exhaling. You misunderstand. I'm not trying to take them away, but I was once in James's position, young, ambitious, and uncertain. I know how tough it can be. Perhaps we can come to an understanding. Let me assist in their education. Let me at least meet them. Victoria swallowed, her mind whirling. Could she deny the twins a chance to know their grandfather? Despite her reservations, she recognized that they deserved to form their own opinions. That's up to James, she said finally, and eventually up to the children themselves. I won't stand in their way if they decide they want to know you. George nodded, something akin to relief softening his features. That's all I ask for now. As he stood to leave, Victoria couldn't help the uneasy feeling curling in her chest. She sensed that George Harrington's intentions were far from resolved, and if the past was any indication, a storm of conflicting agendas lay on the horizon. Weeks turned into a month, and the Harrington household in New York found a precarious balance. James's leadership stabilized Harrington innovations, halting Maxwell Cunningham's grab for power. Slowly, stock prices began to recover, and the board tension eased. Meanwhile, the twins adapted to city life better than Victoria had anticipated. Lily adored the vibrant museums, and Noah found an unexpected passion for coding lessons at a local youth center. Still, drama simmered beneath the surface. Paparazzi photos of James and the children began circulating online. Speculation about their identity grew rampant. Some gossip blogs even hinted that the twins might be James's long-lost offspring. The rumor mill buzzed, pressuring James's PR team to come up with a statement. They decided to remain silent for the time being, but the hush only fueled more speculation. One afternoon, as Victoria was walking Lily home from the park, Lily mentioned that a strange man with a camera had called out to her. Panicked, Victoria rushed them back to the townhouse. She and James realized that living under constant watch was no way for the children to have a normal life. But a far greater scare arrived without warning. Early one morning, Noah woke up complaining of severe abdominal pain. He doubled over, sweating and feverish. Alarmed, James and Victoria rushed him to the hospital. Doctors performed urgent scans and blood tests, suspecting appendicitis. Lily clung to Victoria, tears streaming down her face, while James paced the waiting room, heart pounding like a drum in his ears. Eventually, a doctor approached, wearing a reassuring smile. It's appendicitis, but we caught it early. We'll operate immediately. He'll be fine, but we need to proceed quickly. Terror and relief collided in James's chest. He signed the paperwork with shaky hands, cursing himself for not protecting his son. Victoria was by his side, equally distraught. It struck him how their old animosity evaporated in the face of a medical crisis. They held each other, waiting anxiously for news. The surgery was straightforward, and within a few hours, Noah was resting in a recovery room, looking pale but stable. The doctor assured them he would be well enough to return home within a couple of days. That night, James sat at Noah's bedside, gently holding his son's hand. The beep of the hospital monitors punctuated the silence. When Noah stirred awake, he blinked up at James and whispered, "You stayed." James swallowed back tears. "Of course I stayed. I'll always be here for you." In that profound moment, father and son shared a connection that transcended the storms of the past. But neither knew that outside the hospital walls. The press had caught wind of the emergency. By morning, headlines blazed. James Harrington's secret son rushed to hospital, confirmed father of twins. A tidal wave of attention was about to crash over them all. The next day, the hospital lobby was flooded with reporters and photographers clamoring for details. James's PR team scrambled to contain the situation, but rumors had solidified into fact. The children were indeed his. Victoria, attempting to protect Lily and Noah from the media storm, urged James to release a statement to defuse the frenzy. So he did. In a brief but heartfelt press conference, James Harrington publicly acknowledged Noah and Lily as his children. He spoke of the joy they brought into his life, the shock of discovering them so late, and his determination to shield them from the intrusive glare of public life. At his side stood Victoria, hand in his, her eyes both fearful and resolute. The fallout was swift. Some tabloids indulged in lurid speculation about their rocky past, but to James's relief, the general public response was surprisingly sympathetic. People were moved by the story of a father fighting for a relationship with children he never knew existed. In a twist James never anticipated, this wave of empathy bolstered Harrington Innovations' public image, humanizing him in the eyes of consumers and investors alike. George Harrington, while initially skeptical of going public, soon recognized the advantage. He visited Noah and Lily, bringing them small gifts and carefully measured affection. The children, curious about this silver-haired figure, accepted his presence with polite caution. For now, George seemed content to maintain a respectful distance, perhaps sensing that heavy-handedness would only backfire. As Noah recovered, he faced a sudden outpouring of media attention, but James's PR team made it clear that reporters were to keep their distance. Lily, curious by nature, peppered her parents with questions about why reporters cared so much, prompting gentle explanations about fame and boundaries. In time, the family made a pivotal decision. They would leave New York at the end of the summer, returning to Boston so the twins could resume their normal school year. But James would divide his time more equitably, spending part of each week in Boston. Victoria, in turn, agreed to occasional extended stays in New York when corporate demands peaked. It was a careful balance, an imperfect one, but a step toward a united future. On their last night in the grand townhouse, James and Victoria sat in the courtyard garden, the children fast asleep upstairs. The stars glimmered overhead, and a gentle breeze rustled the leaves. "We've come a long way," Victoria murmured, her gaze drifting to the lit windows above, where the children dreamt. James nodded, a quiet smile on his lips. "I never thought I'd say this, but I'm grateful we got a second chance. Not just with them, but with each other." Her eyes shimmered. "Maybe this time we'll get it right." They shared a moment of understanding. Though old wounds still lingered, they now had something priceless: hope, renewed love for their children, and a determination to face life's challenges together. Thank you for joining us on this emotional journey through the life of James Harrington, a man forced to confront his past and discover the greatest surprise of all: he was a father to twins. In facing the shock of betrayal and the challenge of redemption, James and Victoria realized that love, understanding, and compromise can bridge even the deepest divides. Their emotional roller coaster, complete with corporate battles, family drama, medical scares, and a relentless media spotlight, reminds us that true wealth lies in the bonds we cultivate, not just in the fortunes we build. If you found yourself glued to every twist and turn, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us bring more gripping, heartwarming, and dramatic stories like this one to life. Join us next time for another tale that will keep you on the edge of your seat.